Welcome to Things You Don't Know. In our continuing series here, we look at Donald Trump in another fashion. He holds a distinction no other American president has held. He is the first, and as of August 2026, the only person to serve as president of the United States while carrying a felony criminal conviction. That's not a political label. It is a legal fact. On May 30th, 2024, a Manhattan jury found Trump guilty on 34 felony accounts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Let me repeat that. 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. He was later sentenced, and those convictions remain in effect while he challenges them through the appellate process.
And I have to say, this is not one, not two, but 34 counts. Guys, that's something we really need to think about here. And now this raises two different questions. First, what exactly was Trump convicted of? And second, how can someone be convicted of 34 felonies and still legally become president of the United States? Well, the answer to the second question, well, it may surprise people. You see, the Constitution does not prohibit this.
Right. Let's start by clearing up something that is often misstated. Trump was not convicted of 34 different kinds of crimes. All 34 convictions were for the same offense under New York law, falsifying business records in the first degree. That is a Class E felony. Each separate falsified record produced a separate criminal count.
And those 34 records can be divided into three groups: 11 invoices, 12 accounting or general ledger entries, and 11 checks. 9 of those checks were signed by Trump himself. So when somebody says 34 felonies, that's accurate, but it is also important to understand what those 34 counts actually represent.
The case grew out of a $130,000 payment made by Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, to adult film actress Stormy Daniels shortly before the 2016 presidential election. Now, Daniels had claimed that she had previously had a sexual encounter with Trump. Trump has consistently denied that encounter. The criminal case, however, was not about whether an affair occurred. It was about the financial records created when Cohen was reimbursed. Now, prosecutors argued that the reimbursements were falsely recorded as payments for legal services under a retainer agreement that did not actually exist.
Exactly, Dr. Weaver. And that distinction is really important here. Paying someone for their silence is not automatically a crime. What prosecutors had to actually prove was that Trump participated in falsifying the business records with an intent to defraud, an intent to commit aid or conceal another crime as well. A jury of 12 New Yorkers heard the evidence during a 6-week trial and returned guilty verdicts on every single one of the 34 counts. Trump still maintains that he did nothing wrong and has repeatedly characterized the prosecution as politically motivated. His lawyers are appealing the conviction, too.
Question: why would you pay someone $130,000 if you weren't guilty of it? So let's go to the Rather than reciting count one, count two, count three, 34 different times, here's the useful way to understand the convictions. They were 11 felony convictions connected with invoices submitted by Michael Cohen, 12 felony convictions involving entries in the Trump Organization's accounting records, and 11 felony convictions involving checks used in the reimbursement process. Every one was a conviction for first-degree falsification of business records.
And that's also why we have to be careful here, because calling this the Stormy Daniels case can really obscure the actual crime here. Trump was not convicted of having an affair. He was not even merely convicted for paying Daniels. He was simply convicted of falsifying business records connected with the reimbursement of the payment. That is the crime that the jury actually considered.
Okay, so Trump was sentenced on January the 10th, 2025, 10 days before he returned to the presidency. Judge Juan Merchan imposed what New York calls an unconditional discharge.
Very
That,
briefly, Dr. Weaver, just would like to, you know, ask what pressure that judge was under.
yeah, I don't have an answer to that because I do not know. But what that meant was that Trump received no jail sentences, no probation, and no fine. Remarkable, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
But, and this is important, very important, an unconditional discharge did not erase the convictions. The judgment of conviction remained.
So when people say, oh, he wasn't punished, so he's not really a convicted felon, that is inaccurate and incorrect. Punishment and conviction are two very different things. A jury convicted him, a judge entered judgment and sentenced him. But the unusual part was that the sentence imposed no additional penalty. Quite strange. Now, here's the part that seems almost bizarre. A felony conviction can prevent someone from holding certain jobs, depending upon the state and the circumstances. Criminal convictions can affect voting rights, professional licenses, firearms rights, and other privileges. But yet, a felony conviction by itself does not prevent someone from becoming president? Why? I don't get it.
Because the Constitution establishes the qualifications. Article 2 essentially gives us three. A president must be a natural born citizen of the United States, at least 35 years old, and a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. Notice what's missing. It doesn't say must never have been arrested. It doesn't say must never have been convicted. And it doesn't say must not be a felon.
But now, surely the founders of this country didn't intend for somebody to run the country right from a prison cell, Dr. Weaver.
Well, maybe not, but constitutional law isn't based simply upon what we imagine the founders expected would happen. The Constitution establishes specific qualifications. A criminal conviction itself is simply not among the disqualifications listed for the presidency. There are separate constitutional provisions dealing with impeachment and disqualification from office. And the 14th Amendment contains a separate provision concerning insurrection after taking an oath to support the Constitution. But an ordinary felony conviction, I don't know what's ordinary about a felony conviction, but does not automatically trigger either one of those provisions.
So
Amazingly.
theoretically, someone that's convicted of a serious felony, they still can satisfy the constitutional requirement to be president.
Whether the voters should elect that person is a completely different question. The Constitution establishes eligibility. The voters evaluate fitness.
Now, and this is where we need to be careful here. People hear the word felon and sometimes assume that every single convicted felon is dishonest, dangerous, or morally corrupt. That's too broad of a statement.
Well, I guess you're right. There are thousands of different felony offenses. Circumstances vary enormously. Some people committed crimes decades ago, served their sentences, changed their lives, and became responsible members of society. A criminal record by itself should not become a permanent declaration that a human being has no character or no capacity for rehabilitation.
That is absolutely right, Dr. Weaver. However, Trump's particular convictions, they do raise a more specific issue here. These weren't convictions for an unrelated offense that tells us very little about truthfulness. No, they involve falsification of records and intent to defraud. That makes honesty directly relevant here. That's the
Yeah,
main issue.
yeah, it really is. Listeners should distinguish between these two arguments. Saying all felons are dishonest people would be unfair. Saying a conviction for deliberately falsifying records is a legitimate warning sign when evaluating somebody's honesty. That is abundantly clear and is a very different statement. For a president, credibility matters enormously. Presidents speak about wars, intelligence, public health, economic conditions, national emergencies, foreign governments, elections, and threats to national security. Citizens frequently cannot independently verify what a president tells them. Therefore, truth matters more.
And I guess we have to say this too and avoid another mistake, a very critical mistake, I guess. A felony conviction does not prove that everything that Trump says is false.
Well, no, it doesn't. That would be kind of unreasonable. The proper conclusion is much more narrow. A jury concluded beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump committed crimes involving false business records. The fact is irrelevant when citizens evaluate his credibility. It doesn't tell you whether any particular statement he makes tomorrow or that he made yesterday is true or false. But it can reasonably tell you verify before you believe. And frankly, that's good advice with any politician.
And the difference here is that with Trump, there is now a criminal judgment involving falsification, not merely just an accusation from a political opponent. Trump and his supporters strongly reject that interpretation. They argue that the Manhattan case was politically motivated. They argue that prosecutors stretched New York laws and turned bookkeeping offenses into felonies. That evidence from Trump's presidency should have been excluded under presidential immunity principles, and that the conviction should be overturned. Those arguments are part of Trump's continuing appeal.
Yeah, and he has the right to make them. An appeal is part of the American legal system. If an appellate court overturns the conviction, then we will say it was overturned. But an appeal does not itself erase a verdict. As of this recording, those 34 verdicts remain the operative judgment. That's the fact we have to work with today.
Dr. Weaver, maybe the most interesting part of this story isn't Trump at all. It's what the Constitution allows the voters to do.
Yeah, I think that's right. The Constitution does not give us a character test for president. There's no honesty examination, no psychological evaluation, no requirement for political experience, no educational requirement, and no automatic prohibition against somebody simply because that person has been convicted of a felony. I don't think that's really simply, but whatever. The system ultimately places enormous responsibility on voters.
Which means that the fact that he's legally allowed to be president does not answer the larger question here. Should someone with that record be president? That's not a constitutional question. That's a judgment that citizens have to make.
And I've got to say, in my opinion, no, no, somebody with felony convictions should not be allowed to be president.
And I have to agree with you, Dr. Weaver, especially with the severe counts that he has against him.
So here are the facts without the political shouting. Donald Trump was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. The courts involved 11 invoices, 12 accounting records, and 11 checks, many of which Donald Trump signed. He received an unconditional discharge, meaning no jail, probation, or fine. He continues to appeal. And the Constitution does not automatically disqualify a person from the presidency because of a felony conviction. I think the founding fathers just simply didn't think it would ever possibly happen.
Yeah, I don't even think that was in their imagination, Dr. Weaver. But legality is not the same as judgment. We should not assume that every person who has ever committed a felony is permanently untrustworthy. But at the same time, when a public official has been convicted of crimes that specifically involve falsifying records and intent to defraud, then citizens are very justified in considering that history when deciding just how much credibility to give him.
Well, it's not proof that every statement he makes is dishonest. No, but certainly it's a warning sign worth remembering. And when the person involved is president of the United States of America, the stakes are considerably higher.
Right on, Dr. Weaver. Listen, this has been Things You Don't Know.
Hey, thanks for listening. We've got more things coming, so come on back and join us. In the meantime, give us a like, give us a comment.
And be sure and subscribe. That's very important to us. And we'll see you next time, folks.
Goodbye for now.